time. So I'm gonna open us up in prayer, and then we'll get into our class. Heavenly Father, God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the wonderful opportunities you've given us today to be able to build upon the gifts that you've given us, God. You've gifted all of us to be a part of kid churches or youth groups or just members of our church, God. We ask that you would help us to build those skills, God, that you've given us, to be diligent with the call that you've put on our hearts. God, that you would just help us to always have a burden for those kids, God, that we know how important it is to give your word to them and how important it is for this next generation to be steeped in the word. God, we ask that you would help us to be diligent in our role in that we would continue to build upon the foundations that we've laid for them, and God, that we would just create strong Christian men and women, God, who go out into our community and who make real change, God. We thank you, we love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So the title of the course is somewhat deceiving in that it's called Why Prepare? Well, you prepare because it's important, right? So the class is more about how do we prepare? What does preparation look like? Like what goes into preparing for your class? My name's Chris. I teach here at the school at Cannon Christian Academy. They call me Mr. V. I teach all the secondary math. I've been here for 7 years teaching. Before that, I taught in public schools for 5 years. I really enjoy the school. I love it here. And over the years, I started off teaching, and I was not prepared at all. It was definitely a God thing that I got into teaching because I did not have the qualifications to be a teacher. But they had a need, and I went in and I said, it was kind of funny how it happened. I look back and I think why would you choose me to be a teacher in that situation? My mom was a teacher at the schools, and she says, they have a need for a math teacher at this high school. I was like, well, I don't have an education degree. They're like, it doesn't matter. Like, okay, that's probably bad. So I go and I call the teacher. She's like, can you come in Friday for an interview? I'm like, I'll come in to talk to you. I don't know about an interview. Still had a full-time job. I go in and I start talking to this principal. She shows me around. She's like, so what do you think? I'm like, yeah, I think this could work. I'll have to think about it. And she's like, okay, well, here's a key. You start Monday. I'm like, okay, this is a terrible idea. And I started Monday. Never taught before in my life. And I interviewed on Friday, started on Monday, spent the whole weekend at the school trying to figure out how to teach, and was not prepared. And so there's a lot of things I've learned over the years as far as preparation goes, and I'd like to share some of that. So preparation is just kind of this mindset of thinking through how you want things to go in your classroom. Because if we enter into a class and we just think like, I know my topic, like I know math, like I've been teaching math for 12 years, I can go into a class and I absolutely know everything I'm teaching, and it's relatively easy for me, right? But if I don't think through how the class is supposed to go, especially how the students are supposed to learn, I'm not going to be successful. So I want to put as much thought and effort into how everything is supposed to go before I enter the class, because if I don't, when chaos happens, then the learning stops, right? So we're going to talk about some of the things that I've learned over the years on how to be prepared, some of the things that I think through before a lesson or before a class that I've found important. We're going to start off with a demonstration. I have a volunteer that I volunteered her to do the job. Come on up here, Raylene. Hold on. I volunteered you. Do you know how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Hopefully. I need confidence. Yes, she can. So Raylene's going to teach me how, or instruct me how to make a peanut butter and jelly. Yeah, you're going to talk like into a mic. So Raylene's going to, you're on that side. It's supposed to be red, right? Okay, we're good. Raylene's going to instruct me to make peanut butter and jelly. Ready?
Okay, open the bag of bread. Okay. Grab one piece of bread. Why didn't you grab it like that? Okay. How am I supposed to say? Grab the bread nicely. Don't pet it. Put it on the table. Nicely, nicely. Don't tell it it's a good bread. Okay, grab another piece of bread nicely and slide it next to the other one. Now make them like face the same way. Yeah, it makes me, okay. Now, just hold the jar of peanut butter. Flip it the other way. Okay, now, where the lid is facing up. Okay. Now put it down on the table nicely. Oh gosh. And now just twist off the top. Like just the top part. Hold. Oh my gosh. Hold the jar of peanut butter with one hand, and with the other hand, twist off the top. There we go. Please don't tell me it has a thingy. Okay. Keep twisting till it comes off. Okay, it's off now. Take off the top. Grab the little piece that like flaps over and yank it off. Why did I agree to this? Take the whole little flappy top part off. There we go. Now do the same thing. Don't throw it. Don't do that part. Okay, grab it with one hand, and then with the other hand, twist off the top. There we go. Oh, it made a cool noise. Okay, and then once it's off, set it on the table. No. Pick it up upright. Now grab this knife, one knife. Oh, there's two knives. Grab the knife and stick it into the peanut butter. No, not all the way. Now pick it up just a little bit. And now scoop. I don't know what you're gonna do. Now scoop. No. That works. Now put it onto the bread. And spread it around. And now with the other hand, do the same thing. Now take your hands off the bread. Why did you? Oh gosh. Okay, I'm not gonna let you clean your hands yet. Okay, grab another piece of bread because you messed up the first one, and set it down. Try this again with the knife. Stick it into the peanut butter. No, just a little bit. Stick it in a little bit. And now scoop a little bit out. With the knife, scoop a little bit out. A lot of it. With the knife, no, squeeze the jar. And spread it onto the bread. Do you know how to spread? All right, that's good. That's enough peanut butter. Now, slap the two breads together gently. No, with the, Chihuahua was in Mexico. Oh, okay. How do I explain this? Okay, you need to, making me laugh. You need to put the bread down back on the table and flip the peanut butter. Let me finish my sentence before you go. Okay. Ew. Oh, now you know how to spread the peanut butter. Grab this piece of bread. Gently. And grab that piece of bread gently. And now just the way they are, combine. And put it down. And you've made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Thank you, Raylene.
You're welcome.
She did a great job. She did a great job in that she demonstrated my point exactly. This is what happens when you try and teach somebody something and you're not fully prepared and you haven't really thought it through, right? So, we're going to give somebody another chance later to teach me how to make peanut butter and jelly. That's why there's 2 loaves of bread. I got double of everything. So, be thinking about that if you're going to be the one that volunteers. So, if we're going to be thoughtful about our teaching, that means there's a few things that we want to make sure we think our way through. Because, like you saw with Raylene, she's like, do you not know how to spread? Well, you didn't ask me if I knew how to spread. I don't know. That's your job, right? You're the teacher. So the 3 things that I find to be the most important aspects of a successful classroom is having clear goals and expectations for students, managing a classroom to meet those goals and expectations, and then teaching for the purpose of learning, which is a funny one because you would think people would think that through, but a lot of times people teach just because they think they're supposed to teach, and it's not for the sole purpose of learning, because teaching without learning is kind of pointless, right? If I was up here teaching, I can say everything I'm going to say and have none of you here, and then I would have done a great job teaching, but there's no learning going on, then what was the point of the teaching, right? And that stuff was sticky. So, let's start with clear expectations for students. Our expectations for students is that they believe they can learn and that they believe the teacher thinks they can learn. This is essential for all students to be able to believe. It's important that they know that we believe in them as well as that they believe in themselves. So I get this a lot because I do teach math. I think more than any other subject, because I've never heard anybody go into an English class and be like, I just can't English. Like, I can't do English. Like, or I can't do history. Like, science, I can't do science. Every year I get at least 30% of my students say, I can't do math. I don't do math, right? Which is a terrible mindset to start with, because we're starting off with the assumption that you're going to try and do something you can't do. So your expectations for your students is always going to be that they can learn, that they believe they can learn, and that you believe they can learn. Because it's one thing for them to enter into the classroom and think that they can learn. If they don't believe you think they can learn, we're not going to be successful. And I can believe they're going to learn, but if they don't believe they can learn, we're also not going to be successful, right? So that's one of our fundamental principles here, is that both parties believe that learning is going to happen. And so we set these expectations for our class. Now, expectations are not rules. Expectations are not, we're going to raise our hands before we speak, we're going to line up in a certain way. Those are classroom rules. Those are procedures, which we'll get into procedures in a little bit. Those are not expectations. Our expectations is what we want the students to achieve, right? So classroom rules are meant to support those expectations and to create an environment in which you can meet those expectations. So our expectations is that both parties believe learning will happen, which means in our classrooms we can't have any days off. Because if I tell my students that I believe that they can learn and what I am teaching them is absolutely essential, if I decide to take a day off, what does that say about the thing I'm supposed to be teaching them, right? If I decide, hey, you know how I told you math is super important, and I'm going to use math, and we're going to talk about Kid Church too. If I'm telling you, like, it's so important that you know the Word of God, but then they show up and we're like, let's take a day off. Let's take a day where we just like, let's just not learn about God for a day. What does that say about the topic, right? So it's essential that they believe that we think that these things are essential. Whatever we're trying to teach them is essential to them. Students should learn to expect effective teaching from their instructor, which means we have to have our stuff together. If we show up to class and and we're kind of just, my wife, she just walked out. She doesn't believe in me. My wife knows that I'm kind of like we're just gonna go with the flow. We're just gonna see how things happen. She likes to plan things out. I like to just watch it happen and figure it out from there, except in a classroom, okay? Because we can't do that in a classroom because the students are in tune to that kind of thing. If they come into the classroom and they're like, man, he does not seem like he knows what we're doing today. That's their chance to try and derail me from what we want to accomplish, right? So you have to have your stuff together. You have to have everything organized. You have to have everything ready to go. Raylene was one of my math students. We do not do days off, right? Nope. Sometimes I would kind of tease them a little bit, and I'd come in. I was like, you know what? I'm busy. You're busy. Who wants a day off? And they would all say, are you serious? And they would raise their hands, and I'd say, well, maybe on the weekend, right? Because we don't take days off in math class. So we have to have our stuff together. We have to be prepared. And they should grow to expect that from us. My students never expected that they would come in and have a day off or come in and we're gonna, I don't know, color. I don't know what people do on days off. I don't take them, right? So they should fully expect that because I've said this topic is important, that it's gonna be important every day. It's almost like a social contract that we have with our students in that they believe that we believe that what we're teaching is worth learning. So they have to believe that everything that I'm trying to teach them, I believe is important, which is always tough in math because every year I have students that come in and they're like, when are we ever gonna use this? And if I just say, because I said so, or because there's gonna be a test on that, that's not a good reason. I have to have a reason why math is so important. I have to have a reason why they need to learn what we learn. And it can't just be because that's what you do in school, right? Just like in kid church, it can't be just like, well, we talk about Jesus here, so that's what we're gonna talk about, right? So you have to be able to explain to them why it is so absolutely important that they're learning what they're learning. So our students have to believe that we've done our part to inhibit that learning. And so the way we demonstrate this is the way we manage our classrooms. So if you have a disorderly classroom, it gives off the impression that you have low expectations for learning. If your classroom is unorganized and people are kind of just doing what they want to do and you're not organized and you're trying to figure things out on the fly, what does that tell them about the importance of what you're trying to teach? If you didn't take the time to prepare, if you didn't take the time to make sure that this was going to be the best lesson they ever had, if you didn't take the time, why would they need to take the time to learn it, right? So we have to give the impression that it is important because we want them to feel like it's important as well. So we have to enter into our classroom with confidence so that our students can be confident in us. So if you enter in and you're just kind of, I've seen this in the way people speak in front of large crowds, and I used to do it myself where it was just like, well, I'm gonna start off by letting you know I don't do this very often. Like I'm not a big public speaker, or like I'm really nervous, or like I don't like speaking in front of people. That was a way of being like, hey, like if this talk is really bad, like I told you so, right? Like you're not coming up with confidence if you're doing that. If you come up and you're like, I don't know, your guess is as good as mine if this class is gonna be good, you have no confidence in me because I have no confidence in me. So we have to instill confidence in our kids by being an authority on whatever we're teaching, right? There can't be I don't knows and confusion on your part because it doesn't instill confidence that you know what you're talking about. How are they supposed to believe the things that you say if you're not confident when you say them? They can't have confidence in you if you don't have confidence in yourself. I see this on Fridays, we have a boys and girls group, and I usually spend the first semester where I'll have them list things like, what do you think you need to learn how to do to be a man? And we'll have this big old list, and it's like, build fires, cook steaks, kill animals, stuff like that. And we do some of that stuff. So the first semester we spend a lot of time like just doing skills like that, and I teach them how to do different things. And then we spend the second semester where I tell them each one of you guys has some skill that you're great at that you're gonna teach the rest of the group. And so we just started this last Friday, or a couple weeks ago, and I had one kid that was teaching us how to rope, right? I had a kid last Friday teach us how to do calligraphy. So they teach us a special skill, and it usually doesn't go well, mainly because of the lack of confidence. Like these kids know how to do what they're teaching us, But because they're trying to do it in front of peers, their confidence just like shrivels up. And they're just like, I guess you could do it that way. And so once your audience knows that you don't have confidence in yourself, they lose all confidence in you. And so now it's not as important to learn this thing, right? And so I see it in boys group. And so, one of the things that I do is like, I try and be like the front row student is like, I really want to learn how to do this. Like, I don't really want to know how to rope, but like I pretend like I really want to know how to rope. And like I get really excited about it. That way the other kids are like, okay, well, that way it gives the teacher some confidence. And two, it helps all the other kids to be like, okay, this person must really know what they're talking about. Mr. V is like really engaged right here. So having confidence in your classroom is key. So you got to be that authoritative figure for these students, because they need to know that you have confidence in whatever you're trying to teach them. Because lack of mastery is displayed through our lack of confidence. If we lack the confidence in ourselves, how are we supposed to be, students supposed to be confident in themselves? So if they feel like you haven't mastered the subject, how should they expect to master the subject? Okay? So even worse is, like I said, how can our students believe they can master something they're trying to learn if their teacher hasn't mastered it yet either? So we want to set high expectations for our students with these goals that we're setting for them, because their teacher has confidence in them. There was this study that happened sometime in the past, I don't know how long ago, but they took just average students, average teachers, and they split them up into two groups. And one of the groups, they were like, you guys are the special group. All they did is tell them, you're the special group, you're going to have the special teachers, you're the special group. And then the other group is just like, okay, you're just a regular group, right? Nothing different about either group, right? They achieved the same amount, their scores were the same. All they were told is you're in the special group and you have the special teachers. Nothing else was different. But all the kids in the special group who were with the special teachers scored, I think it was like 35% higher on all of their next testing cycles than the regular group did. And nothing was different. All it took was somebody saying, I have confidence in you, right? And so we have to have confidence in ourselves, because that then helps us to instill confidence in our students. So it's really important that we set that expectation from the start of our class, and it's something that we build on. We believe that they can learn, and they need to believe that they can learn. So that's our first expectation that we have for them. And then you'll build on those expectations as you go. So once we have our clear expectations, we have to support those expectations with our classroom management. So we have our goal, we have our expectation that everybody's gonna learn, and everybody believes they're gonna learn. Now we have to manage a classroom that promotes that expectation. We have to manage a classroom that makes it so that everybody can achieve that expectation. So classroom management is our practices and procedures that help the teacher and students achieve that expectation that's been set. So expectations is the tone we set for the class, and classroom management is making sure that it doesn't get derailed. Okay, our goal is learning. Our goal is always learning in a classroom, right? So our classroom management, or the rules that we apply or procedures we apply, are all meant to support learning. We don't just do rules for rules' sake. We do rules for the sake of learning, right? So classroom management is not about consequences and discipline, but about ensuring the process of learning is occurring. So whatever we have to do to organize our class with rules, with procedures, to make sure that we're meeting those expectations. So we want to have a plan for that, for what we do when everything goes wrong, when everything kind of goes outside of those rules. Because if our goal is always learning, and our procedures are meant to make it so that we can learn, if we start going outside of our procedures, what do? So these are this kind of the idea of being prepared, is that we want to be thoughtful of what could happen, right? Peanut butter and jelly did not go well. Poor Raylene did not have a chance to think through, how much intellect does this guy have that he can open a jar of jelly? Or he knows you don't touch peanut butter with your hands, right? So she didn't have the time to think through this and think through all the things that could go wrong. But we have an opportunity to do that. So we want to be able to be mindful of everything that could go wrong in our class and how we'll handle it when it happens. So we want to have those procedures. And so we also want to have those procedures to kind of keep everything reined in so that there are so few opportunities for things to go wrong that we don't really have to deal with those anomalies that often. One thing that helps with that is routines, because routines are contagious. It's always hard for me to talk about classroom management because, like, my wife, who just did classroom management the last session, amazing at classroom management because she's 5 foot tall, she's a petite little girl, and she commands respect in her class. I just am big and mean looking, so people are usually like, I'll do what you say because you'll hurt me, right? So classroom management has never been really a struggle for me. For her, because she's people think they can take advantage of her because she's little and she's so sweet and she's beautiful and all those other stuff, right? So people think they can take advantage of her, right? So she has to come up with all of these strategies to make sure she keeps these kids in check, right? And so she's great about that. And one of the things that she does is she does routines. She does the same things over and over and over that promote that learning that we're trying to achieve, right? So routines are contagious. I saw this video where it's not necessarily a routine, but it's how people want to follow the pack. So in kid church, we don't have the same set of students every week. It's not like we have the same 20 every weekend. So we get new kids, we get old kids, we have kids we haven't seen in a year, we get a kid that's brand new. Routines are great for those kids because they see what everybody else is doing and they're like, well, I better fit in with that. So I saw this video and it wasn't necessarily about a routine, but it was just how people like to try and fit into what everybody else is doing. This person just they had 3 or 4 people just start a line. They weren't waiting for anything, they started a line. And then people started getting in line behind them. They weren't waiting for anything, they were just a line. Everybody's like, oh, there's a line, we better get in this line. There's 30 or 40 people in this line, and then the original 3 people get out of the line, and so everybody just kind of advances, and they're just all waiting there in line. Nobody knows what they're waiting for, but they saw it was organized, and they're like, all right, well, let's get in this line, right? That's what happens with our kids. When we develop routines, and they start seeing other people doing the same routines, they feel odd being the one not doing the routine, so they want to jump in line with the rest of them. So routines are really, really great for classroom management. You have to stick with routines, though. So if you start a routine, you got to stick it out because nothing instills less confidence than if you start a routine okay, this is what we're going to do every day. We're going to come in, we're going to do A, B, C, and D. And then a week later, oh, this isn't working. So you're all right, let's try E, F, G, H. Okay, now another week is oh, that's not working either. So you try the next thing, right? What does that tell your kids? All I got to do is wait a week, right? All I got to do, I don't have to follow the rules. I don't have to go with the procedure. All I have to do is wait till this one wears off, and then I'll just wait for the next one, right? We did this. It's kind of sad, but this is how public school was for us, is that we would get an administrator, and they'd come in and okay, this is how things are going to be. And we're like, okay, well, you won't be here in a year or 2. So it's I just got to wait out the 2 years, right? Because we knew, it's not going to stick, right? So when you commit to a routine, and this is why we want to be so thoughtful about these routines, is that once we commit to it, we got to stay committed for a while, right? Not that you can never abandon routines, but you have to commit for a time so that they know you're going to be consistent. So whatever routine you set up in your classroom, so I don't teach on Sundays anymore because I'm a coordinator, but I go into my wife's class, and she does the same thing every Sunday. She has a passage that's written on the board. Students come in, they get a piece of paper, they get a pencil, she puts on worship music, they sit down and they read the passage and then they write something about the passage. When they're done writing the passage about the passage, they go up, they show it to her, she talks with them about it, they sit back down. They know I got to raise my hand to get up. They know I have to raise my hand for everything I do. When the time for writing is over, it's always the same amount of time. She stops in the same way. She starts her class in the same way. She goes through her lesson the same way. And all the students just kind of fall in line. Even when they're brand new students, they just watch what everybody else does, and then they go along with the routine. And it works amazing for her. And so, but she sticks with it. She's been doing this same routine for a year and a half now, and it's working, okay? Now, that doesn't mean all routines work. Sometimes you get into a routine and you're like, this is not working the way I thought it would, and you're 6 weeks in. You can change the routine, but you have to tell the kids, this is what we're gonna do, and this is why we're changing the routine. If it's just hey, we're not doing that anymore, we're doing this, that still doesn't instill that confidence that we need, right? So we wanna be able to say, okay, this isn't working for this reason, and you need to express this to the kids. This isn't working. We're going to do this now. But you also explain to them, the reason we're doing this is because we're not learning the way we're supposed to learn, right? Or this is preventing us from learning. Because the expectation is always that we're learning, and the rules are meant to support that. So you can go to the kids and you can say, our goal is to learn. It's not happening the way it should now. So we're going to change our routine because our goal is learning, and then you change your routine that way. So it's okay to change the routine, but you have to be upfront when that happens. Now, sometimes people fall out of the routine. Sometimes on Sundays at Kid Church, we have kids that just want to act up, and maybe they didn't have enough breakfast or whatever it is, and maybe they're having a bad day, and we have to discipline them. So we always want to discipline with a loving heart, right? We always want to make sure that they know that the reason that there's discipline is not because we don't like what they did, it's because that thing they did is preventing them from learning. We always tie it back to learning, because the thing they're supposed to be learning is so important that anything that comes between us and learning is bad. So it's not about their behavior. It's not about, I didn't like the thing you did. It's about, it stopped you from learning. And we agreed, because you had a social contract with them, and you set this expectation, we agreed that the goal was learning, and this is preventing you from doing that. We need to fix that, right? So it's not about them, it's about the fact that there's no learning happening. So we need to prepare in regard to classroom management. That's determining what strategy you want to use. You can do rewards, you can do consequences. Rewards are great, but they can get out of hand. If kids are just doing things to get the rewards and they don't see the benefit in actually changing behavior, rewards aren't always the best thing, right? Consequences are the same thing. It should all point back to, we do what we do because the goal is learning. And then we also want to be able to reinforce all these good behaviors somehow. One of the, and Pastor Sean's our headmaster, and he kind of told me something the other day. I was like, man, that's a good point. He's like, do we treat all our students the same? And I think that, and he was talking more behavior, like, dude, like, is this a bad kid? And we approach them like, oh, you're always doing something bad. And the good kids, it's like, oh, you must be out here praying. The bad kid is like, oh, you're writing on walls, So we approach every kid the same. The same thing is true about expectations. The kid that doesn't believe in themselves or doesn't have high expectations for themselves, we have to instill those expectations in them. You're going to have kids that come into your class and they're going to be like, yeah, I know I can learn. I'm amazing, right? And then you're going to have the kids that come in and they're like, no, I can't do anything good, right? I see it in math all the time. I have some students that come in and they learn it first try and they have all the confidence in the world. And I have some kids that are like, never going to happen, right? So we have to try and instill that confidence in every student, regardless of what you think their abilities are. We have to always instill that confidence in them. So once we have clear expectations and we've developed this environment for learning and to stick to that learning, then we can start designing our lessons. How do you want to deliver whatever the information is that you're trying to get them to learn? So our planning should always start with the goal in mind. What are you trying to achieve? What is the thing that you want them to learn? You start there and you work your way backwards. You start with, what do I want them to learn? And then you start working with, how do I get there, right? So we start with our goal in mind. In school, we would call this our standards. We have standards for things that we want our students to know. And not only that we want them to know, we want them to be able to demonstrate that they've learned it. So in Kid Church, we do the same thing. Whatever your topic is for that Sunday, you start off with, what do I want them to leave my Sunday school class with, or Wednesday night? What do I want them to leave with? What is the important thing that they need to know? And then you work your way backwards and say, well, how are they going to achieve that? Once you know what they're supposed to know, you want to make sure they know what they're supposed to know. These are our objectives. They need to know what they're trying to learn. It shouldn't be a mystery. It shouldn't be that I teach the class and the class is like, well, I think I learned something about lines. I don't know. He drew a bunch of lines on the board. Like I feel like some learning happened, but I don't know what it was. If you tell them from the beginning, this is what you're going to learn today, they're always in the back of their mind like, oh yeah, that's what I'm trying to learn, right? So you always want to start them off with, what is the objective for the class? What do you expect them to learn? So then they know what they're expected to learn. So we're still building on those expectations so that it's clear what the purpose of the lesson is. So a good lesson starts with expectations given to students and students knowing what they will have to produce. Okay, so we also want them to know that we're going to check to see if they understood it. Because like I mentioned before, it's not just about putting a goal out there and me teaching, it's about you learning it and being able to demonstrate that you learned it. So students are most successful when they know where they're going. By knowing where they're going, students have a meaning for the journey and they're walking towards something. Like I said, we don't want it to be a mystery what they're supposed to learn. They need to know what they're supposed to learn before we start trying to learn it. So once we have kind of our goal in mind, we start working our way backwards and we say, okay, well, if I want them to know this, how am I going to get them there? And the first thing that I always do is I say, okay, what background knowledge do they need to have before they can learn what I'm going to try and teach them today? Okay, if I'm going to teach them how to graph a parabola, there are certain things you have to know before you can do that, right? I make a list of, okay, these are the things that they need to know before we can even start class today. So I want to know, what is the background knowledge? Do you want to do this on a Sunday? Like if you're teaching on the resurrection, what are the things that they need to know in order to be able to understand the resurrection? What is the background knowledge? What is the minimum amount that they can come in with to be able to be successful in the class that day? So you want to make sure that you have that background knowledge, and then we're going to talk about how you gauge to see if their background knowledge is where it's supposed to be. So once you have a clear goal or expectation, and we know what background information we need, then we start coming up with a plan of how we're going to deliver it, right? This could be in Sunday school, it could be a game that you're going to play to show a certain characteristic that people are supposed to have. It could be a video you're going to show, it could be direct instruction, you could be telling a story that demonstrates whatever they're supposed to learn. It could be just a conversation. I really liked because I used to teach third and fourth grade for Sunday school. I would just have a conversation with the kids, and I'd ask them questions, and I'd kind of play dumb a lot of times. I'm like, well, what is that? What does this mean? And you have a conversation with them, and you can deliver instruction just through a conversation and just doing question and answer with the kids, because I'll ask them questions, and they ask me questions, and our answers kind of build the story that we're supposed to build. So it doesn't always have to be, I stand here and I deliver my instruction, and then you guys take it in, and you guys are better now, right? It could be a conversation, it could be a dialogue, but you have to decide partly on your personality type, what things you've tried before. You need to determine what that instruction method's going to be. And you also need to know, like, how else am I going to deliver it? Because sometimes you deliver your instruction and it doesn't work, and you go to check and you do your assessment, which we're going to talk about assessments. You do your assessment, you're like, okay, well, nobody knows what I'm talking about. Right? What do you do next? What's your plan B for making sure they understand this? This was very hard for me when I started teaching math, because I was always really good at math. In my math classes, they'd explain it once, I'd understand it, perfect. I only need to know the one way. That's the best way, because it's the one way, right? I don't need to know the 2 or 3 other ways. So I never did. And so then I get to a point where I'm teaching kids math, and I explain it the way I know it, and they're like, yeah, that makes no sense. I'm like, no, but it should. It should, because it makes sense to me, should make sense to you, but it doesn't. So I'm like, okay, well, I explain it in a different way. We call this differentiation in school, but I have to explain it a different way. Okay, well, that way didn't work, so I got to explain it a different way. I had this wonderful math student who, every time I explained anything, he got it. He probably understood it before I finished my sentence, like that's how good he was at it. And he had asked me, we were doing summer school, he's like, can I come in and help as a tutor? I was like, yeah, that'd be great. Comes in, he has to explain how to divide fractions. He's like, oh, you just flip the second one, multiply. Student's like, well, why? He's like, because I said so. What do you mean why? Why do you need to know why? Just do what I told you to do. He's so frustrated. And that was a perfect example of he never needed to know another way until he had to explain it. And so that's the kind of mindset that we want to have. When you're explaining something, the way you know it or the way you learned it might not be the way other people learn it. So you have to develop that skill of how else can I think this through, right? So you want to not only have the way you're going to deliver the message, and hopefully it works the first time, but you also have to have the backup plan, and then the backup plan to the backup plan if those ones didn't work. So you want to think through those things. So after you plan, you need to determine how you're going to check for understanding. Because like I said at the beginning, and I've been saying throughout, it's not just about teaching, it's about learning. The way we know if they learned is that we check with them. We check to make sure they understand. That's our assessment. So how are you going to find out if they learned anything? And one big question is, when should this happen? If I teach a whole class and it's an hour long, and then I do my assessment at the end, right before it's time to leave, and I figure out with 2 minutes left that nobody learned anything in my class, it's too late. I got 2 minutes. How am I going to reteach it in 2 minutes, right? So assessments don't just happen at the end of class. It happens at all the important points. Okay, as you're teaching, you want to do little assessments. You want to make sure they're still with you. So your assessment should be like taking the pulse of the class and saying, okay, are you still with me? Because if you lose them and you don't check till the end, it's too late, right? So assessments need to be happening throughout our lesson because that's how we know if we're still engaging them. So the way that I set up my lessons is there's some sort of warm-up or attention grabber to start it off that kind of gets them into the headspace of learning. It should be something engaging so that they're trying to use their brains a little bit, kind of warms them up to the idea of learning. This is a good place for object lessons or object lesson with the peanut butter and jelly. It's a good chance to engage, right? So we want to do something to engage them, and then that's usually, after I engage them, that's usually when I start checking for that background knowledge. So at this point, I haven't given them their objective because we might not even make it to the objective today. Because what prevents us from getting to the objective, if I start looking for background knowledge and I start probing to say, okay, do you have the background knowledge that we need in order to do the class? And I start checking for background knowledge. So we're asking questions, having conversation. If I determine that you don't have the background knowledge, I'm not going to start my lesson because it's going to be a waste. So we got to spend some time building up the background knowledge. So sometimes you enter a class and you're like, my objective is for them to learn this. You check for understanding for background knowledge and they don't get it. They don't have the background knowledge they need. Don't do the lesson. Build on the background knowledge. Next time you do the lesson, right? So that's my chance to check background knowledge. Once I know that they're ready for the lesson, then I give them the objective. The objective is, this is what we're going to learn today. So I give them their objective after I've checked for that background knowledge. That's what they need to know in order to be able to meet whatever that goal is. So we're always referring back to that goal too. We don't want to set our goal at the beginning and then refer back to it at the end. We want to constantly, as we're going, make sure they understand, like, this is all building towards that goal. Remember the goal? Remember what we're trying to learn? This is building towards that, right? So we want to continue to refer back to that goal as we're teaching. You don't always have to make the instruction process that complicated. Like, sometimes we throw in more things than are needed in order to learn whatever they're trying to learn. And there's all this extra stuff in there that they don't see how it ties into the goal, and so it makes it hard for them to see what they're supposed to learn, or to see that they actually achieved what they were supposed to achieve. So you want to simplify your lesson as much as possible. You want to simplify it so it's like, okay, this is my goal. And you want to trim off all the extra stuff if you can. So all the extra stuff that isn't necessary to achieve the goal, you trim that off. And if you have time at the end, maybe you can include some of that stuff, right? But don't make your lesson too complicated, because our goal is our goal, and that's what we're trying to achieve. You have to, that note doesn't make sense. All right, assessments. So, like I said, we want to be assessing to make sure that they understand what they've learned. In Kid Church, we're kind of limited with this because, like in school, I can do formative assessments where I can have them sit down, take a test, and that could be what we do for the day. But in Kid Church, we don't have that, right? So we want to be constantly checking usually through oral assessments, like to make sure that they understand. Obviously, this is hard with little kids because you're not going to get little kids to sit and have a Q&A with you. You know, third grade and up, you're pretty safe. Anything below that, they're maniacs. And so you have to just kind of like figure it out, right? And so when I would teach like first and second, we would always have like at the end, we would kind of like color and stuff. It's like, okay, this is a great time to see if they learned what they were supposed to learn. So they'd be coloring, and I'd go sit down with them, and I'd be like, well, who is that? It's usually they're coloring a picture of the person we learned about. It's like, who is that? Well, what did they do? So you start asking them questions, and they'll answer the questions as they're coloring, and you just kind of go one by one or table by table, and you do your little assessment, right? Because remember, the goal is learning, and so we want to make sure that it's actually happening. So that's a good way to do it with kind of younger kids. I typically try and stay away from younger kids because they're younger kids. But you always want to be taking that pulse of the kids to see if they're learning the things that they need to learn. And the other reason why we want to kind of do these little assessments throughout is because everything's kind of building, right? We call it scaffolding. So if they know point A, we can move to point B. If they know point B, we can move to point C. If you wait till point D to check to see if they knew everything A through D, and they didn't understand A, they're probably not at D yet, right? So when we finish A, when we finish the first important point, like they need to know this point before we can move on. That's when you do a little assessment. Figure out if they understand what you're talking about. Then you get to B. So that's another thing that you have to be thoughtful about before you plan your lesson is like, okay, so this is the goal. What are the important points or the important checkpoints that I have to go through in order to get there? And figure out where those checkpoints are, and then keep that in mind as you teach. So our assessment can be an oral assessment. What I would say is I make this mistake in my class sometimes. I'm like, you guys all understand? And they're like, yep. They're like, we just want you to stop talking. So we got it, right? That's not a good assessment. Saying, does everybody understand? Not a great way to ask. Or just opening it up to questions to the students like, okay, who can answer this? And there's always the one student that knows exactly the right things to say, and they're gonna answer all the questions. And that's great. We already know that kid knows it, okay? That's like one of the pastor's kids, or it's one of the people on staff, it's their kids, and they're like, I've been through this lesson 3 times this week. Like, I know all the answers, right? They already have their worksheet all figured out before the class is even over. So you gotta kind of figure out a way, like, how do I check to make sure each student in the class understands what we were talking about? One good way to do that is, we call it think, pair, share. It's you kind of put them in little partner groups, or maybe 3 in a group, and you pose a question to the group, and what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to think about it individually, and then they share it with the person next to them, or they share in their pair. I shouldn't say share. They pair up, and then they talk about what they thought, and then after that, the pair shares out what they learned. Okay, so you start off as an individual, and you're thinking about the question, and so maybe the student's like, I don't really know what I learned. And then you say, okay, you're gonna pair up with the person next to you, so then they discuss it with their partner. So that's another opportunity for them to get that information again, and then they share it out to the group. So not only do they hear it, they have to think about it the first time, so they heard it from you, then they gotta think about it, then they hear it from one of their peers, and then they're gonna hear it again from all of their peers, so that gives them 3 more opportunities to try and understand whatever you're trying to teach them, right? And it's a good way to check to see if everybody learned what they're supposed to learn. And as a teacher, when they're doing the think, pair, share, when they're doing especially the pair part where they're talking with their partner, that's your chance to walk around the room and listen to their conversation. Because if you're listening to their conversation and they're way off topic, that's your chance to intervene and be like, let's kind of reteach that. That's where the differentiation comes in. So those are some of your opportunities to kind of check to make sure they're learning. And then after every class, one of the most neglected habits is we lack reflection on the class, right? We need to reflect on our class and how things went. So it's great to have a plan, but if you never reflect on how the plan went, how do you know it went well, right? So you can teach the class, you have this amazing plan, and you get through it and you're like, I made it through another Sunday. All the kids are still alive. It was a success. And maybe it was, but could it be better? If you take the time at the end of class to reflect on it and really say, okay, could I have done something different? Like, could I have spent less time doing this and shifted that time somewhere else? Could that have been better? And then really think about, really meditate on how your class went and say, is there anything I can improve on? All right? And then you take those things that you said, okay, I think I should do this differently. And then the next class you do that differently. And then you reflect again, okay? Because we're constantly trying to improve this process of learning, right? Because that's what's really, really important. What time am I supposed to end? Do I have time for another peanut butter and jelly? Yeah, okay. So because you have to be prepared, I'm going to give, how many minutes does it take to prepare a lesson on how to teach somebody to do peanut butter and jelly? What's the minimum amount of minutes? 1? I'll give you 3. Because if Dorothy can do it in 1, that means the rest of us need 3 minutes. Okay, so 3 minutes, come up with the best plan that you can to teach me how to do peanut butter and jelly. Okay, all the things we talked about. Okay, we want to be mindful of what's the goal? How do we get to the goal? What background knowledge do we need? Right? Does he know how to open jelly? Very important. How can I deliver this better? Should I just tell them to do it? Maybe some demonstration would help. Okay, so think it through. What is the best way for me to learn how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? I'll give you 3 minutes, and then somebody's going to volunteer to teach me.
Okay, Chris, I feel very confident that you will be able to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Have you ever made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich before?
I made one earlier, but it didn't seem to go that well.
Okay, so let me just explain to you briefly how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You're going to take 2 pieces of bread. Can you guys hear if I have it there? You're going to take 2 undamaged pieces of bread.
Right now?
Not yet.
Okay.
You're going to use the knife. You're going to carefully open the peanut butter and jelly without spilling it.
Okay.
You're going to use the knife to evenly distribute peanut butter on one piece of bread, jelly on the other piece of bread. We want to keep the peanut butter and jelly on the inside of the sandwich. A sandwich is bread, filling, bread. So we don't want to have peanut butter and jelly on the surface of the table. We don't want to have it on the floor. You don't want to have it on your hands. That's why you have a knife.
Kind of do.
Okay. We do not want to have. The expectation is that the peanut butter and jelly will be on the inside of the bread.
I like when you use big words.
Okay. Is there any question that you have about how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
No, I got this.
Okay. Do you know how to open the peanut butter and jelly without spilling it?
Can you show me?
I can. So to open the jelly, you'll hold the jar firmly and twist it open, keeping it solid on the table. You're not going to tip it over, okay? The same with the peanut butter. Okay, do you feel like you can open the bread? And be very careful with the bread because we want it undamaged.
Okay.
Okay, so do you feel like you can start?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, so you just need two. That's okay, because you know what? We're going to make lots of sandwiches. So go ahead and take two, and only two pieces of bread, but we're not going to damage them. We're not going to smash them. We're going to be careful with them. Treat them gently. Go ahead, two. Carefully, good. Now you're going to want to put the peanut butter and jelly on the inside, so you're going to separate the pieces of bread. Nice, very nice. Good. You can. Remember what we said about opening the jars?
That's before.
Mm-hmm. We're going to open those jars.
Which one goes first?
Either one, you can pick. Very good, that was great. And you're going to use that knife. Remember, you're going to use the knife to distribute the jelly on the inside.
Oh, okay.
Just on the inside. And that's fine. Sometimes we can use the other side of the knife. And that's probably enough.
That's good.
That's good.
I like a lot of jelly.
That's fine.
Okay.
I think that's good. So you want to evenly distribute it so you don't see any bread. Just jelly. And you don't want clumps.
I need more jelly.
You're doing a great job. You know what? And that's good. That's good. That is
I
great.
see bread. Miss Gibson, I see bread.
You know, that's fine. That's fine. Now you're going to do the same thing with the peanut butter on the other piece of bread. This is a beautiful sandwich.
This one doesn't look like the jelly.
Right. So you
See, that doesn't look like
hold it carefully. Hold it carefully, just like you. Yep. And you're going to hold it carefully and peel that little piece of foil off. You know, that works too. All right. Now use your knife and scoop the peanut butter out and spread it so you don't see any bread. And that's probably, oh, that's too much. I would cut back a little bit on that. Yep, use about half that much. Yeah, that's good. That's great. That's plenty. That's plenty. Great. So now just kind of spread it around the bread. You know, let's go ahead and put that over here so it's not a distraction. All right, so go ahead and spread the peanut butter on the top of the bread with your knife. Remember, we're going to keep it off our fingers.
no fingers. I remember.
Right, right. Great. That looks beautiful. Nice. This is going to be delicious. You are doing a great job. So much better than the first time. All right, go ahead and put them together. Peanut butter on top of the jelly so that the fillings are in the middle. The fillings are in the middle. And that is beautiful. Well done.
You can take it with you, actually. I don't want it either.
What about you? Turn it up. You want it up there?
Thank you, Miss Gibson. I feel like you knew what was going to happen. I feel like you were fully prepared for that lesson. She did good. She rolled with the punches because some of the mistakes that were made the first time were not made the second time. Very patient. I felt very confident in myself throughout that process because you felt confident in me. So we can see the difference when put a little thought, we think about things that could go wrong. You got to see somebody else do some things wrong. And sometimes you're the other person that you saw do things wrong. Sometimes the class before is like, I did everything wrong, but now I know the things not to do, right? So sometimes you're the person that you get to watch and see that it doesn't work out that well. So just kind of to close, kind of cover some of the main points. What we do in Kid Church is so important. And we have so little time with these kids that we want to make sure that learning is happening. Teaching is not about dispensing knowledge. We can teach to a room full of chairs and tables. It's about learning, right? So we want to make sure that kids are learning because really that's what our ministry is. Our ministry is serving these kids and building them up as disciples of Jesus. And so that doesn't happen unless they're absorbing whatever the knowledge we're trying to impart on them is. On the way to the conference this morning, I heard a pastor, and he was speaking, and he was talking about his church, and he was talking about how he wants to have a loving church. And it's like, okay, well, we got to have great greeters, and we got to make sure that when people come in, they feel loved, right? We got to make sure that like we're hugging everybody, and like we want to make sure that everybody like maybe if you don't have food, you got to have food, right? So we have all these things that we do because we love the body. But he said the most important thing, the absolute most important thing that you can do for somebody because you love them is to teach them God's word. And that's what we have an opportunity to do with these kids, is we have this opportunity to disciple them with the most important thing, and that's God's word. So we want to keep that in mind. And we want to always take it serious. We only have, here on Sundays, we have about an hour with them. We have an hour to teach them the word of God per week. And we want to make sure that we're as effective as possible. And that happens by making sure that we're mindful of all the things that we do, thinking through the process, and making sure things are going to work out for the betterment of the learning. Okay? Heavenly Father, God, we thank you for today. We ask that you would bless the rest of this conference. God, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to grow in these skills. God, we ask that you would help us to always be mindful of the things that we do, God, that we don't walk into our classes flippantly and just, trying to come up with things as we go, God, that we're effective in what we do because we're mindful and we've put the time and the effort into making sure that we have good lessons and that students are learning as much as possible in our classes, and God, that we're constantly improving, God. God, we want to be better tomorrow than we were today, and we want to continue to improve every day, God, because you are worth it, and these kids are worth it, and your word needs to be taught, and we want to be as great as possible when we do that, God. We thank you for all the things you bless us with. We ask that you would continue to bless the speakers here, that you would continue to help us to be encouraged in our fellowship and all the things that we learn, God. We thank you, we love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.